Hi, my name is Amy.
And my name is James.
And this is How I Learned to Love Shrimp, a podcast about promising ways to help animals and build the animal advocacy movement. An absolute treat of an episode this week, as we were asked to interview longtime advocates Leah Garcés and Sharon Núñez live from the Animal and Vegan Advocacy Summit in Washington, D.C. in May earlier this year. The episode was also recorded and is available on our YouTube channel. As I didn't read them out on the day, I'm going to start with a little intro to them both, and then we're off with our enlightening episode. So Leah Garcés is president of Mercy for Animals and author of Grilled, turning adversaries into allies to change the chicken industry. She has nearly 20 years of leadership experience in the animal protection movement and has partnered with some of the world's largest food companies on her mission to build a better food system. Leah oversaw international campaigns in 14 countries at the World Society for the Protection of Animals and launched Compassion in World Farming in the United States. Her work has been featured by national and international media outlets. Sharon Núñez is the co-founder and president of Animal Equality, a leading international animal protection organisation, ranked as one of the most effective animal rights organisations in the world for 3 consecutive years by animal charity evaluators. Animal Equality works in 8 countries, has 11 offices in major cities, and a total of 70 employees. Sharon has studies in sociology, and before devoting her time to animal equality in 2006, Sharon served on the board and worked at several animal protection organisations in England and Spain, and both Sharon and the work of animal equality has been featured in international media. Thanks so much, everyone. So James and I started the podcast, How I Learned to Love Shrimp, a little while ago. Really excited to be doing a live episode here at the AVA Summit. As Sharon said, thanks so much for joining us. It's a real pleasure to have an audience. Obviously, it's normally just us behind our screens. So to be doing this in person with Leah and Sharon is a real treat for us. Neither of them need a hefty introduction, of course. We will be speaking to Leah Garcés, president of Mercy for Animals, and Sharon Núñez, president of Animal Equality, and both of whom have been in the movement for 20 years plus. And so we thought, what better way to stir some really stimulating conversation than hearing from them both on these really timeless lessons for activists through this huge 40 years combined of activism. So welcome, Sharon and Leah.
Thank you so much for having us.
And big up to Amy for nailing Sharon's last name's pronunciation. She tried that several times in the warm-ups.
Núñez.
That's right. And the first thing we're going to start off with is, so you guys both got in the movement in your 20s, like some of us are still in now. And I guess, what did you think at that stage that you've kind of come to that is maybe how things have changed over the past 20 years?
When I first started, and you all might relate to this, I was convinced that this was we just need to approach this rationally. And all we need to do is just tell people what's happening, and they'll change their behavior. So lots of fact sheets, lots of detailed reports. I was an information researcher at Compassion in World Farming when I first started. So this was like, this is all I need to do. I just need to tell people the facts, and they'll be convinced. Very rational. So that was quite a long period of that. And then when I realized, people know, and they're still not changing their behavior, I went through my angry phase, which you also might relate to, where I was very angry at people, and angry activism was at my core. So that period lasted probably about 10 years. Before then I switched to, the chickens don't care why people choose not to eat them, choose to care for them. They just want people to do it. So I just need to get people on the path, wherever they're at, with whatever arguments that convince them to get moving in the right direction. And so there was a real evolution of my approach, but my early phase was just, if only people knew. They just don't know. That's why. It was a very innocent initial phase.
Yeah.
Can you relate to that?
Well, that was my answer, Leah. First of all, I wanted to thank Amy and James for having me in the podcast, and it's an absolute honor to be with all of you, and with Leah Garcés, who is I don't know, a legend in the movement. And I do want to have a little shout out for someone, because Leah and I have been 20 years in the movement. There's someone in this room that's sitting over there who I want a big round of applause. That is Mia. And she's been in the movement for 29 years. So, thank you.
Then I have to say that Gem sitting next to her has also been in the movement for equal amount of time as started off in investigations.
Well, for all of those of you...
We've got some legends in the room. We do, including you, Sharon.
Just for those listening who aren't in this room right now, we will link both of these amazing activists in the show notes, because we would love to know more about the work that you've done over the last, however many years you've been in the movement. Thank you.
So yeah, my answer is quite similar to Leah's because she stole it from me. I think she didn't. I think I went through a very similar process where I just thought in my early 20s, if people just knew, but not even if they saw slaughterhouses, if they just knew about speciesism and that it's wrong to discriminate other animals because of their species, they'll go vegan. And of course, that didn't go well. And I remember that our leaflets used to look like, we would say in Spanish, like medical prescriptions. Like they would just be, we would know photos and it would just be text. And we would make the text as small as possible to try to get as much in as possible, because we were like, the more they know, the more they'll go vegan. And then I think that's something that changed, of course, as we became more mature and sophisticated and understood that the world is emotional and not necessarily rational. And I would say the second thing was how quickly I thought that change would happen. I thought that it was just a matter of years for the population to go vegan. I was raised in Spain. I started my activism in Spain, and that didn't happen either. And though we've seen a tremendous amount of progress for animals over the years, I think it's really important that we recognize and acknowledge that this is a marathon and that it's for the long term. And that's definitely given me some headaches.
Yeah, definitely. I think we can all relate to some of that early sort of naivety when we join, because we're all just so passionate, right? And so we think if we can just explain it to people, then they'll change their minds. So I definitely relate to that. Definitely went through an angry stage. Did you have an angry stage? Are you still mad?
Still there.
Fuming. And so thinking about that, those kind of early thoughts, what sparked your initial thinking into this more sort of sense of a long-term view, an approach, coming to the realization that it was going to be a long fight? Sharon, when did that start for you?
I guess I went through, as Leah was saying, several stages. We stopped doing these 100-page leaflets, like booklets. I remember I translated Francione, and we started giving out Francione's books, thinking that would make people abolitionists, not only vegan.
I feel like we need an archive gallery of all of these terrible leaflets. We should have them on display.
What not to do.
Yes, showing this progression.
Yeah.
And then we started showing footage of investigations, and it was very clear to us that this worked, right? And I'll never forget in 2010, for the first time in the history of Spain, the news opened. The news is always at 3:00 in Spain, and it opened with images of pigs in farms and with a female pig caught in a gestation crate. There, I think we began to understand, okay, this is something that we have to show people and treat differently than we were before. I think what really transformed me as an activist, as a better activist, was in 2011, I was part of a team of people who were investigating fur farms across Spain. And I was detained for 5 days in jail. I was put in solitary confinement. And wow. I remember being terrified. I remember They took me from Madrid to the north of Spain, and they put me in a little like thing. They would give me any seat belts or anything. And I truly do remember looking outside and seeing the animals passing by, and just like no relation to them. Like nothing was going to happen to me, maybe go to jail or prison, but just feeling that sense of, just the need to act. And as it progressed, as we spent time in jail, as fortunately that case got closed, because it was all based on it was just all based on lies. And actually a judge in Spain came out saying that investigations were not only legal, but that they were important for the democracy in Spain. I think we really started thinking about, okay, like this is what we're up against. We really need to become as sophisticated as possible with our strategies. Yeah. And I remember that just before the arrests, we'd done an investigation into 12 zoos in Spain. That was before we were farmed animals. And we didn't used to sue farms and zoos, because we were like, well, it's systemic. It doesn't matter where it's farmed. But in this case, it was like, no, we're actually going to sue the 12 of them. And it exploded in the media. And from there, little by little, just learning and becoming more sophisticated with our strategies. I always say that when we started doing actions in 2003, 2004, we would just stand outside McDonald's with banners that read, like, McDonald's is death and an animal. And now we stand outside Denny's with a banner. But that is part of a campaign that has a specific objective to achieve at a specific timeline that brings us closer to eliminating gestation crates. So I think you can clearly see the lack of sophistication, though I admire anyone who does activism in one's case, and then the more thought out way of thinking about how can we achieve long-term change.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to think about the experiences we've had that really shifted our thinking. And for me, that was around 2014. And it was at that time in the United States, I was living in the US, and no one had been inside a chicken factory farm for about a decade. There hadn't been any investigations in the United States. And I had been calling companies and like, can I get a tour? You can guess what the answer was. No, you cannot. And I got called by a journalist to look at a stack of papers, which included the feed additives of what was going into a chicken farm. And I said, where did you get this? And he said, oh, this farmer gave it to me, which I hadn't expected. And this farmer turned out to be a man named Craig Watts, who lived about 5 hours from me in North Carolina. And he gave me the number, and I started talking to him. And really my strong intention there was to build a fake relationship, go in, get footage, and get out. That was my entire intention. And I called him, we built a relationship, and I said, can I come film? He said, sure, come and film. And I went there with my friend Reagan Hodge and the camera. And I remember even saying, like, it's possible I'm not coming back from here. I don't know why this man is letting me into his chicken farm. So here's the address. Look for me like rotting away in the chicken litter. That's probably where you'll find me. And I went there with that intention, like, just get the footage, get out of there. No one's seen inside of this. We don't have this footage. So we went, and I then had the biggest shift in my thinking that I could have possibly thought. And so I found myself sitting with this man in his living room, going over his videos, his papers, his anger about the industry, and saying, like, he had seen the same exact commercial I had seen of Jim Purdue saying that these animals are treated humanely and farmers are happy. And he got so mad. He was so mad, just like I was so mad. And as I was sitting there, I realized this person, like, I could have been him maybe. If I had been born in a different situation, I could have been this man. I could have lived this life. He's got the same fire in his belly. And it was then that, we went on to then film. I was working with Compassionate World Farming at the time. We filmed, we exposed. It was a big deal. literally still dealing with a lawsuit related to that.
Wow. 2014?
Yeah, 10 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, they're trying to depose me now for it. But had such an impact. And I realized that this was a huge thing I had been missing, like a huge blind spot where I had just made really wrong assumptions about who are my enemies and who are my allies. And so this is where I thought, like, one of my specific contributions is to build big tents that lots of people you don't expect are going to get under. And this is very important to building power. We don't have enough power. We don't have enough issue salience. We don't have the ear of the government or companies as much as we should for the issue as it is. And the way we do that is to build power. And we need to build solidarity with anyone pushing in the same direction as us. And it doesn't have to be exact. They don't have to be our exact, values, but we need to build. And that was a big change for me and a big shift in how I act as an activist.
Yeah, I guess two things come to mind on that. I guess my colleagues, Ari and Alan, do a lot of lobbying for alternative proteins, and they've been remarkably surprised at who are the allies that want to support them. And you think maybe alternative proteins, traditionally quite a climate-focused, democratic-leaning thing, but actually people on the Republican side of the aisle are really big fans for reasons of economic job development, food security, being competitive on the international market, and saying actually some of the most supportive people have been people they've least expected, and if they didn't even try to get a meeting, they would never know.
Yeah.
So I think this idea of unlikely allies is super important. So that in addition to your longevity in the movement, both of you, you're the presidents of two pretty major organizations, so probably acutely aware of the challenges facing the movement. So I guess I'm curious, over the past 20 years, what's emerged for you guys as kind of the key challenges facing the movements today?
I don't know what you're talking about. It's all very peaceful and easygoing.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
Activists are super easygoing.
You have any thoughts, Leah?
Well, you forwarded me this survey, which I hope you share with folks, because I think it's really interesting, where Apollo Academic Survey.
That's correct.
They contacted 120, you say.
Should I say it?
Yeah.
Okay. So some research we did at Social Change Lab and Apollo Academic Surveys, we basically surveyed 120 academics who research social movements in the lens of political science and sociology, and asked them a bunch of questions, and you can find that on the Apollo Academic Surveys website online. But one of the questions was, what are the key reasons that movement failed to achieve their goals? And I actually didn't have this factor initially, but David Copenhagen said, you need to add this factor. I can't believe you haven't included it as an option. And it was movement infighting, which actually was the top factor, according to these 120 academics, why movements failed to achieve their goals. And that was pretty profound for me, because I didn't even think about it, and people think it's the top, and I think anecdotally, it might be alive for you guys as well.
Yeah, we talked about it today.
DZ, I just tricked you into answering the question for me.
Shit.
So basically, I think, as your survey points out, the number one reasons movements fail is infighting. And there's another phrase, which is called horizontal hostility. And the idea is that when the power that you're trying to change is so difficult and you're really making very little progress, you have a frustration, and you start taking it out laterally on someone who's very close to you but not exactly you. So for example, vegans, vegetarians, right? We're really pushing in the same direction, but we start saying the way you're saying it is the reason why we're failing. And then you spend all your energy fighting this person who really should be, you're really aligned with more than, somebody who's like a big chicken company or something. And horizontal hostility ruins movements. It causes failures. It wastes energy. And it's something we've talked a lot about. And I think one of the key things about infighting is to just don't talk about infighting. Just move on. Like,
correct.
Just we spend too much energy even thinking and talking about it. We actually just need to accept that there are differences. There are going to be discomforts. There's going to be gnarly conversations, and there is going to be some hostility. But whatever, that's human nature. Move on. Like, we're still moving in the same direction, and it's okay. And that's okay.
So you think talking about it is giving it too much airtime, or potentially even like encouraging it? Because maybe there's new people in the movement who aren't aware of such, polarizing views. So maybe it's giving it a platform that it doesn't deserve to have?
I think that when we experience infighting, I try to deal with it pretty calmly, pretty quickly, and put it into perspective and simply say, like, don't let the small differences be your dictator.
Right.
Take a big step back, realize we're on the same team, and move on. And like have a very mature approach to this, and then move on. Like, we're not talking about it anymore. This person is not your mortal enemy. Like, move on.
Yeah.
Sharon, do you have any thoughts on reducing
Absolutely,
infighting?
Yeah, I mean, I'd heard it before, but when I was speaking with James this morning, he mentioned the specific data. I think infighting isn't the cause. I think it's a symptom. And I think it's a symptom of two things. One, a lack of a clear campaign goal mission. And second, a lack of character development in all of us advocates and activists when we are thinking about us and our ego and what we did and our work and not about the mission. So I think if we think about the big moments in history, and I love when Kennedy said, we're going to the moon before the end of the decade, no matter what it takes. And everyone was like, that's not gonna happen. It's not gonna happen. You know what? I don't know, but I think we got to the moon.
Bit of a conspiracy coming out there.
We got to the moon. And this was because there was a very clear mission. We need to get to the moon. Everyone had clarity on what they needed to do. And I think it was bigger than the people who were involved in the specific, processes. So for me, it's really, infighting is just a symptom of two things. One is we need to develop our character, all of us, as advocates, as people, as activists. We need to understand that our egos are sometimes get in the way. My ego gets in the way many, many times. That we have to stop complaining. We have to stop blaming other people for what doesn't go right. We have to have the courage to give feedback and to tell people what they need to hear to make them stronger advocates. And they have to find the courage to tell us. And most importantly, we need to understand that we have a mission that is saving animal rights. I like to talk about animal rights, and that this is far bigger than us. It's not only far bigger than us, but it's far bigger than the people who came before us, the people like Jill Phillips, who died. We've heard this week that Australia and the UK banned the live transport of animals.
Woo! Yeah! 50 years.
Jill Phillips died. A mother died defending that. And I think it's so important that we understand that we are part of a history, a present, and a future that is much bigger than us, and that we put our egos aside and even ourselves aside, and we commit ourselves to the mission. That animals are our mission, the most important mission for most of the people who are here. It always has to be about animals. Is this the best thing for animals? And there we will find, I think, a lot of solace to infighting, because you're not focused on you, you're focused on external, something that is bigger than you. So I would say it's a symptom of perhaps what I mentioned.
Yeah. There's one great saying by Paul Engler, who wrote the book This Is an Uprising. Great book, recommend it. And the saying is, momentum creates alignment. Alignment doesn't create momentum. And it's kind of what you guys are saying. It's like winning, well, actually, when you're winning, no one's really fighting or squabbling over small things. But then when you're stuck in a rut and not winning, and we are up against something very big, you turn on each other. So it is tough. But I guess besides infighting, does anything come to mind for either of you in terms of other big challenges that we're facing nowadays as a movement at large?
Well, resources.
Of course.
Yes.
Please donate.
For any funders in the room. Yeah, I think in the last, my understanding is in the last year, there's been a decrease by 10% of giving to farm animals in the United States. That's reflected in the work we can do. That's a challenge, and we have to figure out how to build power and build alliance and allegiance to our cause so that people give more. At the same time, though, I will say, Sharon and I have been doing this a long time. We did the work on a lot less money before. It's not a doomsday. But at some, we do need more. Money helps. Money helps. We could reach more people. We could have more power with more money. Yeah. I think that's a challenge we're facing acutely right now. I don't think it will last, but we have that challenge.
The movement, I think, is at a stage where we need to really understand who our victims are. Our victims are animals. I think we need to establish that animals are victims of this cruel injustice in the world. And then we will be able, though, of course, I agree with Leah related to collaboration, but then as a strong, unified movement, we will be able to kind of work with others, but also bring our mission forward. I think if we think about the strongest times when our movement was just like killing it, and we won't agree on all of the tactics or even the strategies, but we think about things like SHAC, like the Stop Huntington Life Sciences, to close Huntington, a laboratory, a place where they tested dogs for vivisection. We think about hunt sabbing and all those people who risked their lives to stop a fox from being killed. I think we're missing that. And I think that a part of it is that our job at Animal Equality, at least, is to animals. And I think I mentioned it, but I have a post-it on my computer where every single sentence, every single paragraph I write, I put the word animals in it, because it's so easy for them to, they lose in coalitions, they lose, and we want them to win. So I would say that is really important, that we just bring animals everywhere. I was at South by Southwest, which is a very famous event in Austin. There was absolutely no talks about animals. And it's just, we need to do whatever it takes to put animals on the agenda.
You said there that animals lose in coalitions. Can you maybe speak briefly to what you mean by that?
This is not a phrase I've come up with myself. I heard it from someone and I've experienced it. Animals are always the last. They're always the most insignificant, and they're always the most vulnerable. And we just need to recognize that truth about our victims in order to be able to, I think, defend them appropriately. In coalitions, there is issues that are more salient. I think it can be done, but I think that we also have to take into account that issues that are more salient will probably take that first spot. But if we are focused on making animal rights salient in itself, through the incredible work that Mercy for Animals does with investigations, through the corporate campaigns that we're winning, promoting some of the work that Greener by Default and other organizations are doing, I think then we will be able to have the power to be at an equal stance with other movements and bring forward what we want for animals. My experience is in coalitions, animals get they get pushed to the side. Someone might have other experiences. So I think it's really important that we build our strength as we are, as ALDF says, we are the lawyers of animals. And we will fight for them as the SHAC campaign did, as Huntington Life Sciences did, as many of you in this room and all of you in this room do, whatever it takes.
Thank you. Yeah, great. We don't have time to go into both of your very varied pasts actually, but I would encourage anyone who gets the opportunity at a conference or any other event to speak to you both in much more depth than we're able to do now. I think both of you have, just incredible journeys to share. But for now, we'd like to kind of top strategic lessons learnt from you both. You know, what are those key learnings? What would you like to pass on to perhaps new activists or emerging leaders, existing leaders in the space who are open to learnings from you both? Leah, let's start with your first one.
You were alluding to this earlier, that one of the key strategic lessons that I've learned is that success requires focus. So if you are going to do something and you want to be successful, you have to prioritize, you have to say no. There has to be a very important no so that you can say yes and focus on the things that will make a difference. And in that ask that you make, that campaign needs to be as simple as possible and clear as possible. And I have made so many mistakes where, you know, especially working in coalitions, speaking of coalitions, where then you're negotiating like what looks like a contract for buying a house, you know?
Yeah.
But really where we've had success is where we're able to say, cage free, that's it. Cage free. One ask, everybody can imagine it in their head. So that's a really important thing. Can somebody imagine it very easily? Can a layperson just imagine it? So simple, clear, focused. And if you can't do that, your likelihood, as you get more complicated, less clear, less focused, your likelihood goes down and down and down for succeeding, I think. The other one is what I was saying earlier about seeking out solidarity with anyone who is pushing in the same direction as you. And there's a phrase we use, which is that there's the tyranny of the small differences, and we become captive to this tyrant. That instead of focusing on the bigger picture, we focus on these tiny little differences we have, and we spend all our energy on it. So, building solidarity and ignoring the small differences.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I'm actually going to give an example. I think one of the most important things we need to do is build our character as activists. And I want to actually share, Leah doesn't even know I'm going to share this. But once I was on a telephone call.
I'm not supposed to tell anyone about that, Sharon.
I'm glad. It's good for you. I was on a telephone call with Leah, and we were talking about Prop 12. There was this incredible win in California to get animals out of cages. And I remember there was this person, of course I'm not going to identify them, and they were just criticizing this and this and this and this. And Leah just stopped us all and said, what we need to do is we need to get these animals out of cages. And I will never forget that, because it was such an example of character and focus on what you can control. Like, stop complaining, stop, bitching about this, sorry if I can't say bitching, stop,
It's fine.
And I'll never forget when she said, what we need to do is we need to get these animals out of cages. And that's what Prop 12 is about. I think Leah is an example of someone who has the character to be an activist and a leader. So I would say build your character, build your humility, build your courage, build your discipline. There's nothing more important. That's what you're going to fall back on. Secondly, I would say you're probably wrong. I'm probably wrong.
About everything?
Or? Probably. I remember Jan Songfreddy from Anima International had us at a conference in Kira a few years ago, and he said, okay, stand up if you've been in the movement over 10 years, and sit down if everything you thought then is nothing you think is wrong now. And everyone sat down, most people.
Sure.
Or maybe it's one person who stood up, right?
Yeah.
So we're becoming more sophisticated and knowledgeable, and especially we have organizations like Animal Think Tank, we have organizations like Faunalytics, the research that organizations like Humane League or us or Animal Equality or Mercy for Animals is doing. But just have that humility, right? You're probably wrong. And I would say, as a response to that, learn as much as you can. I have spent so many years doing things without reading a book that exactly explained how to develop a theory of change, or what a strategy was, or how to run an effective campaign, or call a campaigner from Greenpeace and ask them. I kind of, with my team members, we figured it out ourselves. We did it. We did a decent job, but we would have been so much faster if I had had the humility to understand, I don't know what I'm doing. I need to learn. So spend time learning about strategy, about other movements, and about just reading as much as possible and speaking in events like this to as many people as possible, people like Mia or people like Leah or people like, I can't remember your name, I'm sorry, but people who've been 30 years in the movement. I mean, it's priceless. It's priceless. There's 30 years in the movement. Can you imagine? It's priceless.
We'll definitely take some reading resources from you both as well that we can link in the show notes if there's been anything you can think of that's been particularly inspiring for your journeys, either now as leaders or in the run-up. So yeah, we will link those following the podcast.
Yeah, and two things. We didn't mention in the beginning, but we're going to do at least 15 minutes of like the live Q&A, so folks can pop questions in the Hoover app. Please do that, because we don't have that many good questions. So please start adding stuff in and upvoting or whatever, and we can ask Leah and Sharon that in a minute. And then maybe I'll ask a question and then you can do the controversial question, Amy, because I don't want to do that
there's
one.
a controversial question.
Oh yeah, we know it's coming. Anyway.
A what question?
Controversial.
Controversial.
They said they wouldn't ask.
Yeah.
I'm leaving right now.
No, not that one.
Not that one?
No, I guess. So you guys spoke about kind of lessons that more like strategic for the movement, you know, success requires focus. You're probably wrong. I'm kind of curious to hear about like personal lessons you've learned as an advocate, a person, whether it's to do with resilience or whatever. I guess anything comes to mind for you, Leah, maybe first?
The most important one that I have to remind myself pretty regularly is to not confuse the magnitude of our task with my self-worth. And I'll just repeat that. So don't confuse the magnitude of our task with your self-worth.
Can you explain what that means? I don't know.
One more time?
Yeah.
Can we break it down?
You need to explain it. Don't just say it again.
Okay. What I mean is we're up against this really difficult task that's very slow, and we're very attached to an outcome, and we want it to happen soon. We want animals to be liberated. And we spend our life energy on this. We spend our waking days, our creativity, our brain power, our physical bodies, our spiritual bodies working on this. And when we're seemingly failing, not succeeding in the sense that it's not over, it can be really difficult. And there's a lot of challenges with that. And what I think is really important is don't confuse that with your worthiness. And by that, I mean your worthiness to rest, your worthiness to be joyful, your worthiness to have friends and vacation, and also your worthiness in the sense that you are worth something to the animals. And what I try to do sometimes is imagine how the animals see me. Imagine all the animals you've ever helped, whether it be a petition you signed or something you campaigned on. And just imagine, because they can't talk, imagine what it's like to be them seeing you. And they are very grateful. And you are very worthy of this fight. And you're very worthy of this life and the rest and all the things. And it can be very confusing when the task is so hard, and not to confuse those two things. I also think in that, it's a lot of what you're saying about ego, and you're a very amazing, well-read person, especially on stoicism.
Yes, and I actually have my stoicism quote here ready for you.
Ready. I'm teeing you up. I'm getting you ready. But it's this idea of ego that you have to let go of, and to realize this is a very long task. And there's a long, I like to think, I have a bigger thought that there's like this, okay, now I'm going to get super hippy dippy. Can I go for it?
Go
Please.
for it.
I'm doing it. Like there's this Should I?
Yes.
We're ready. Deep breath, everyone.
Aligning
Deep breath.
chakras.
There's like this giant divine project of building a more compassionate world, right? That compassion is the project, and that we are just soldiers in that project. And
That's not very spiritual and compassionate.
that's
soldiers.
as far as I can go, all right, James?
Well,
That's
yeah,
me.
I heard the original, and this one's better.
Yeah, it's like, there's this huge project of building a compassionate world that lasts before we were here and will last after we're here. And we just drew the straw of like, you're the soldiers for animals. And so just do that job. And your ego's not part of this. You're just one of the soldiers that have been assigned to build a more compassionate world for animals, which is part of a bigger project of a more compassionate world, which is improving the whole world.
Yeah.
And that's like, I try to keep that pretty close to my heart so that I don't get thinking I'm some kind of hero. That's not the point. Like,
Sure.
It's not about me. I'm just like marching along, doing my job, and don't worry about how it turns out.
I think that humility, I mean, I really don't, and I think it's important for organizations to think about this. I'm the president of Animal Equality. I'm an activist. That's all I am. I'm an activist. And I'm in this position for some reasons. I think I can do a good job, but I'm not more important or less important than the person who is doing the accounting or the person who is engaging with restaurants to get them to introduce more plant-based options, or of course the person who's doing investigations. We're one. We're one movement. And I think it's really, really important that we understand that this is much bigger than ourselves. And then for the Stoic quote, so I'll be honest, I struggle, and Dulce knows this. Well, Dulce is my colleague, one of my best friends, and probably the person I admire the most in the world. So Dulce knows I sometimes, you get this email, you get this message, and you get frustrated, and you're like, oh God, how can this happen? How can this person not get this? And it's all ego. And there's the Stoic quote is, tolerant with others and strict with yourself. And just taking that step back and not responding from a place of ego or anger or frustration, or just understanding like, yeah, this is part of the work that I've signed up to do for animals. And the best thing I can maybe do now is just go for a walk and respond to the email later on. So that's a very specific example that also ties into strategy and impulses. We have so many impulses to do certain things that we think are the right strategy or the right tactic, but just take that step back. Like, yeah, it was your idea. No, it was an idea. Make sure that you do your SWOT analysis, strength, weaknesses, etc. Make sure that you check with other people. Make sure that you have a solid ground to be able to push or move that strategy forward. And all of that can just be summarized in one word, that is, be humble, be as humble as possible, and the animals will win.
Thank you. What does the landscape look like from all those years ago? Can you believe what you have achieved within this time? I know we've spoken about the journey still ahead of us, but actually such a mammoth amount of time and progress, within those 20 years. Do you feel, optimistic about the achievements that we've had within those last 20 years?
It's both. You have to be patient and understand things take time. But also, as an example, in Spain, I always like to put 1975 LGBTQ people were put in prison. 2004, the president decides to pass the Marriage Equality Act. That's 30 years. So yes, it takes time. When you're in 1975, you're like, this is never going to happen.
Yeah.
It happened. It happened in 2004, and then tons of countries followed. So the progress that I have seen in the last 20 years related to animals is spectacular. When I left Madrid, I'm from Spain, there was one vegan restaurant or two. There's like 50 or 60. There's like a vegan restaurant opening every week. It's all junk food, but it's really good. The changes we've seen with companies, I mean, people would tell us like, you're never going to get hens out of cages. And, you know, we've basically changed the industry in so many countries where these animals, of course, their conditions are still bad, but they aren't in absolute agony without being able to flip their wings in a cage. Right. And the same legislatively. And I think if we look at countries like Mexico, we look at countries like Brazil, we look at countries like the UK, we're beginning to see the ultimate win for animals. That it's when it becomes not only cultural, but when it becomes legislation. And that's something I'm very proud of, what we do at Animal Equality, and our team members who are here do at Animal Equality. They're focused on, you know, that big picture, like changing the culture and changing legislative work.
Awesome. Leah?
Ditto. No.
Oh, perfect.
Well, kind
Sure.
of. I mean, like 25 years ago, not a single company had any cage or crate policies.
Yeah.
Now thousands do, thanks to our efforts. 25 years ago, there was zero legislation for cages and crates. Now many countries, many states do. There was no Impossible Burger. There was no Impossible Whopper. Yeah. And now it's become a normalized option for, you know, you're saying. Also, this is a shrimp podcast.
I own.
It is.
May I just note.
Do it.
We launched a shrimp campaign.
Yes, you did.
What? Mercy for Animals launched a shrimp campaign this week. I mean, come on. If you told me 25 years ago that I'd be launching a shrimp campaign and be really stoked about it and think we're going to succeed in protecting shrimp, I would be like, you're bananas. That's not happening. I mean, we're activists, so we are eternal optimists. We're hopeless optimists. Like, you can never break our optimism. Yeah. Ever.
Yeah. Amazing. We're going to move on to the question and answer, but in terms of our questions, thank you so much. Just getting to know you both more, even just in preparation for this session, has been, incredibly inspiring for me, with you both being such prominent and frankly badass leaders in the space. Thank you so much for your time.
Our pleasure.
Thank you. It was really fun.
It's not done yet. Don't worry. Top question is good. I like it. I think you will both be a bit biased, so it was a well-placed question. What is your opinion regarding the movement launching new organizations and strategies versus those same resources going to the largest 3 to 4 groups? Considering the trade-offs between orgs with big muscle, Leah's been working out,
oh my God.
versus being nimble and small. So I don't know, maybe Sharon, you want to take some first?
Why not? I can go first. I think it's very important to support the larger organizations that have a history of success, strong leadership, strong teams, and that have the infrastructure to do things like undercover investigations. I mean, Leah knows this. Doing an undercover investigation is basically like very, very complicated, especially when the person goes undercover, and you need resources, you need talented people, you need lawyers, you need cameras, etc. So I think it's fundamental that funds continue going to organizations like Mercy for Animals, Animal Equality. I also think it's important that new organizations with new ideas and new leaderships are created. I'd be cautious in ensuring that the growth is, that it is a constant growth that we can keep up with as a movement, and that we don't end up, and this happened in Spain with sanctuaries, where suddenly there was 50 sanctuaries and most of them closed down, where we end up with a lot of organizations who are missing the resources, or are missing the knowledge, or are missing the ability to be able to continue forward. So they'll of course have the support of Animal Equality, but I think it's really important that there's a deep thought, and I think this does happen in the effective altruist movement, a deep thought about, okay, what is needed? Who's going to be the person? Who's going to be the founder? what are they going to do? What is the theory of change? And how are we going to measure success? So I think as long as that happens in a way that is contained and constrained and measured, I think it's a very, very good thing. But I think it's also important that we have grassroots campaigns like Direct Action Everywhere, and I think it's very important that there's organizations like Mercy for Animals.
Yeah.
Nice. I think there's a funny thing you mentioned about resources. At the same time, we're probably the most acutely talking about and aware of resource challenges, and yet we have the most incubators we've ever had. So there is a funny thing there. But anyway.
I think the problem is not that there's too many groups or too many approaches. We just don't have enough money. That's it. Like,
sure.
That's the problem. We should be experimenting. We don't, nothing, we're very in their infancy as a movement. We need a lot of experimenting. It's good to have a lot of things being tried. We also need to stop when we see something's not working. We're not good enough at that as a movement. Like say, that didn't work, shut it down. There have been a few examples. But I think the real problem is we need to be getting more money into the movement, not doing less things. I think that you need the big groups, you need the small groups, you need the nimble groups, you need the established groups, you need all of it.
How do you balance being a movement leader amongst other aspirations, like, for example, being a parent? Leah, I'm sure you can relate to this one, but also pursuing other goals.
Well, I mean, Sharon and I are like at a very similar place in life, I feel. Yeah, where maybe we can call it not a middle-age crisis, but a middle-age expansion.
Yeah, middle-age wonder.
Expansion. It's a very important point in which I now spend an hour and a half every morning for myself. And I have 3 kids who are still at, school-age kids. So, I exercise, I meditate, I journal, I eat a good breakfast, and then I start my day. And you can't tell me you don't have time for that, because I have 3 kids and I'm a CEO. I have time for it. You have time for it. And it's an important ritual for me every morning to create boundaries and balance. Sometimes I'm bad at it, and immediately I see how I behave when I'm bad at that.
Right.
I see myself, like the things you were saying about being reactive, not having a clear mind, reacting emotionally. Those sorts of things start to happen when I don't invest the time in that balance. So I've learned the hard way, but at this point, I'm not willing to sacrifice those things in order to have balance.
So you feel like it's possible to have both?
It's not just possible, it's critical.
It's just as necessary
for longevity of being an activist. You can't do this work for a long time if you don't have those rituals in place.
So very similar to Leah, even in this conference, I decided that I had to cancel a breakfast with Leah.
She's better at me than boundaries than I am, actually.
Which I was really looking forward to. But I was like, I'm not starting any day before 10 a.m. Oh my God. Wow. Nice. 10 a.m., please.
It's about to get started.
And I just wake up, I make Dulce her coffee. Dulce is not my partner. She's just my best friend. I make Dulce her coffee, we chat a little, I do some yoga, I do some meditation, I read some of my books, and then by 9:30, 10 p.m., I'm ready to go down. And, I think having done that, I think you can notice the calmness in me. Having done that has just made this whole experience of coming to a conference not something that is stressful, but something that I'm like, I'm going to wake up in the morning, I'm going to have some breakfast, I'm going to chat with Dulce, I'm going to call my husband, so I'm going to read a little. So just making sure that I'm really, really taking care of myself. And just recently, nothing serious, I went through a health crisis. I was fine. I was going to survive. Yeah, I wasn't going to die. But it really put into perspective, I'm 43, and it really put into perspective the need for me to eat healthy, to exercise, to also fill my soul with the things I love. I love art, so does Leah. I love reading. I love wonder. I love nature. And that feeds my soul to be able to then bring that to animals. So I would say just, everyone knows inside themselves and herself, or himself and herself or theirself, how what their boundaries are. We know, so just listen to yourself and just take care of animals, but also take care of what you need to be an effective activist.
So the questions have been too easy so far, the crowd thinks.
Oh,
So we have
We're
one
gonna
hard
end with
question
the
to finish.
difficult
Let's just
question.
end with this one.
No, it's not that one. It's not that one. You guys will have to find out later what that question was. No, this one is... Okay, last question, and we'll wrap up. But this is a big one. So what do you think the movement needs to do over the next few years to make sure we fulfill the thousands of corporate commitments that we have outstanding?
Oh,
Very different vibe. Leah, thoughts?
we're getting serious.
We're getting
again.
serious.
We're not
It's 10 p.m. The day started.
going from spiritual awakening to hardcore activism.
Let's get shit
back
done.
to that. Okay. I have a lot of thoughts on this. It's a focus of Mercy for Animals. There are thousands of commitments coming to fruition over the next couple of years. It needs to be our singular focus. Like we put all this effort in. We're so close to ending cages for hens in particular. We need to, I think, one of the key things we need to do is have clarity of roles in the movement and clarity of focus. It should be a big focus. We worked so hard to get all those commitments. They're coming to fruition. The companies are waiting for us to do nothing.
Yeah.
We can't let that happen. The hens are relying on us to get them out of their cages, to put the nail in the coffin of that system.
I couldn't agree more. I really resonated with what Leah said about just making sure that we're all being strategic and not doing the same thing. That's one of the reasons why in the US we decided to focus on crates, because so many companies like Denny's had made commitments in 2012 that they haven't followed through. And we have the amazing Dr. Devon Deere here with us, who's our institutional outreach manager. And she's focused exactly on that, on finding out as much as she can about the industry. She's incredibly knowledgeable and making sure that the industry is moving towards a crate-free, cage-free future. But also we need strong campaigns. And I think that's something we've really understood. I mean, at the beginning at Animal Equality, but we kind of had a time, and now we're back to really badass campaigning. And when I say badass campaigning, and Devon knows this, like one of our campaigners, Dane, says things to me sometimes, and I'm like, oh Jesus, I love that you've said this, but there's on signal, but there's no way we're going to do this. So we need bold campaigning to be able to keep these companies accountable. And what campaigns do, like we were at the headquarters of Denny's and to present signatures, and we were able to get media, Fox News, and Denny's is, we don't know where they are, but they're closer than they were before. And finally, I would say we need to start locking legislative change. As I was talking about LGBTQ or same-sex marriage, actually in Spain, I think it was like 60-70% were in favor of marriage equality when it was passed. It was a huge counter movement. Now it's the country in the world where it's like at 90%. Like no one, like everyone agrees with it. So we must understand that, yes, culture changed legislation, but legislation also can change culture. Mm-hmm. So let's make sure that we're focusing on legislative changes, building on those campaigns, building on those corporate outreach or those institutional outreach objectives, and also building on the plant-based objectives. So people, when they decide to go vegan, they just have vegan options. It's just easier to be vegan than to not be vegan. I would say that's the next step for our movement, yes.
Thanks so much, everyone, for being with us, taking time out on your Friday evening. You could have been at the bar, but you decided to be here. Thank you so much. Again, thank you so much, Leah and Sharon. It's been a joy and such important lessons for us all to learn for the next 20 years, right?
We'll be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's repeat this in 20 years. Please just one more time for Leah and Sharon.